Welcome back to the Girlfriend Doctor Show. It is Dr. Anna Cabeca, and I'm grateful to be here with you today and to talk about a really important area in our lives, and especially as women. We're going to talk about boundaries today. And I have done so much work in trying to, I've read the book on boundaries by Dr. Cloud, and I have done group therapy classes on boundaries and codependency and all these issues, and looking at how do we hold our line? How do we hold what is true to us and be able our yes be a yes and our no be a no? And I think it's an important aspect, because a lot of times we may live in the maybe area versus being able to really speak up for what we do want in our lives and hold that line, and also to protect ourselves and to honor ourselves in holding those lines or those boundaries. And that's what it stands for. It's that self-confidence, that assuredness, and the compassion that we have for ourselves and for others when we're able to be true to ourselves and authentic. And I was at our unicorn event. It was founded by Cynthia Pasquale and JJ Virgin, and we had a wonderful group of women together in Austin, Texas. And one of the speakers that they brought in is Dr. NaniLea Diamond, and she trained as a chiropractor, but works in the world of human potential, nervous system reprogramming, and the sacred feminine, combining these, her experience, her heritage, her upbringing, her intuitiveness, and her science and medical experience into what she teaches and holds. What she did during her 1 hour session with us was a class on boundaries, and it was so powerful. We had women in tears and then just so re-energized by this experience, and it was beautiful. So I wanted Dr. Nanale to bring this to you today, to bring you her expertise on this area. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Dr. NaniLea Diamond. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here. Really, that talk you gave, the presentation, the
Mhm,
experience, really, it was experiential, was
mhm,
very, very powerful. It was powerful for
mhm,
me. It was powerful for the entire room, and you could feel the energy shift. And one thing
mhm,
is that sometimes you think like masculine and feminine, and you think boundaries, hard and, you know, black and white type situations, and you really changed my perspective on that and brought in the feminine. And I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about yourself, and let's dig in.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to touch on something I heard you say right away of that it was energizing. And what I found with boundaries and with working with, classically, I'll go a little bit classically trained as a chiropractor, and then postgraduate went into how to rewire the nervous system for optimal peak performance. And with my husband, we had two wellness centers in California for 12 years and worked with, we did over 80,000 sessions, and just got my hands in humanity and the nervous system and what rewiring really is about, and in our potential. And then from there became a mama, and took a deep dive into the sacred feminine, and realized that the nervous system is our master computer, and any sort of behavior that we have, any emotion that we have, any thought we have, uh, is preceded by a nervous system pattern, a sensory motor pattern in our nervous system. So before it becomes something that's expressed, it's a pattern in the nervous system. So I would go and go from the back and an upgrade in the system And then a person has new thoughts, new emotions, new ways of seeing things. It was like a rewire, like an electrician going back to rewire something, and then just new access and new frequency and new availability of energy comes. And then I began working with women and realizing that, because a lot of what I was undoing was conditioning in the system and rewiring from conditioned patterning in the nervous system. And for women, there was specific patterning that was different and, unique for women. What we're taught, what we're told, how we're conditioned to be or not be. And
How did that compare to men? Like you say, different conditioning.
yeah, well, I mean, just in the body curves, the spinal curves are a little bit different, and the conditioning of, for example, the low back will be in hyperextension if a woman is in a certain consciousness of like sending out a signal of like a mating signal, which is why we have high heels, because
Mhm.
it accentuates the lumbar curve, the low back curve. So just as an example, if that curve is accentuated as a hyper curve, it can be associated with a woman feeling that she needs to kind of hypersexualize herself. Or it can be associated with traumas. It can be associated with different things. And our body, there's wonderful work from Candace Pert, who's a cellular biologist, and she had the book Molecules of Emotion.
Mm.
And she talked about your spine is your subconscious mind. So before we have an experience in the brain, all of those signals, most of the signals are going upward, in from our environment, but they filter through the spine before they come into conscious awareness. And there's little thresholds, little gates at every spinal level that are controlled by the emotional brain. And so if something's not safe for us to feel or experience, we'll filter it out, or something doesn't match our idea of reality, we'll filter it out until we're kind of ready to see it or be with it. And we have this innate response that I know it's become quite popular now, of fight or flight, that we're aware of, in the nervous system, and the stress response. But what most people don't know and aren't aware of is that begins in the spinal cord. And that when we have an experience that is just too much on any level, too much of a load of information, or too much to process, or is scary, and we go into defense, our spinal cord will elongate 2.5 to 3 inches, and will
No idea.
literally, yeah, and it will change the whole architecture of the spinal cord. And that then the blood and the energy and everything from rest and digest centers goes out to the arms and the legs, where you get ready to fight or to run. But it begins in the spinal cord. So what my area of study was for all those years is and there's 5 distinct patterns that the spinal cord will go in. And those distinct 5 patterns, and there's several hybrids of those, have associated consciousness states with them. So I'd look at the body and be able to tell what pattern was running, and then know what consciousness was probably going on in varying degrees of defense or growth physiology, and be able to track what a person might be saying or what their choices might be.
Mhm. When you
And
say
then,
the 5 states of consciousness, what are those 5 states?
oh, five patterns that the spine
Patterns.
will go in. Yeah. Yeah. 5 patterns that the spine will go in. And that's kind of going off in a tangent of all the
The
neurophysiology of it, but just to get an idea of, how we wire, and then so undoing that. So for women specifically, it would be like what consciousness was held there, as they, both men and women, all beings would have those 5 patterns, but as we would unbundle, there would be certain consciousness that was there that was a little bit different for women, of what we are conditioned to think that we have permission for, of our yeses and our nos, to speak to what you were bringing in at the beginning. And for a woman to even have permission to be in her full sovereignty. We're still coming out of like the 70s, where a woman was allowed to have a bank account, or allowed to, just permission to be in her full power and have yeses and nos, and to stand in them, and to feel that she has a right to have them. It wasn't that long ago that, that rape within marriage was not made, it was just made illegal, like within the last 100 years. Like it hasn't been that long that we are still kind of in our consciousness catching up to our full sovereignty, is what I see. And so what my work has been is to support a woman, and men and couples and families, in wiring for that full sovereign state, and wiring for truth and freedom and choice. And a lot of it is undoing a lot of the patterns and the epigenetics that are held over generations, where we subconsciously don't give ourselves permission, or it shows up in ways where we will sabotage and not hold a boundary, or not set a standard, or not do something, because there's a subconscious holding in the system that says that we're either not worthy, or there's a conditioning that keeps us from giving ourselves what we really desire. And there's a lot of conditioning.
A lot of conditioning. Yeah, I can think
Yeah.
about it. The words that are said to us, we should do this, shouldn't do that, you can do this. And even with ageism, right? You're too
Mhm.
old for this, you shouldn't wear this, or your hair this way or that way, or, I mean, there's a lot of conditioning that we're dealing with today. And I like when you talk about full sovereignty. What does it look like for full sovereignty as a woman?
Oh, that's exciting. Um, really, I have my throne behind me there. I use the archetype of the queen, and I would say, just simply, full sovereignty is she lives by her truth. She doesn't change it for anyone, anything. It's sovereignty is, self-authority, and honoring truth, and what the best to your ability you feel truth to be, really living by that, and not bending yourself or changing yourself for anything. A sovereign being is one that will not be swayed, by anything, will not sell out, will not drop. It's just, it is really fully living what is true for them in that being, and embodying that truth, and willing, in an undefended state. I say also, it's like undefended. You're not, a woman in her full,
Unapologetic. Right.
unapologetic. And I say too, like, she'll speak quietly and move mountains. She
Mhm.
doesn't need to shout about it. She doesn't need anybody to agree with her. She doesn't need, permission, and she also doesn't need applause, or, in the face of judgment or criticism, whatever it is that comes, she won't change herself.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then sometimes getting to the truth, like there are
Yeah.
layers, like look at it, maybe layers of mud or whatever before you can
Yeah.
get to what your real
Oh
truth
yeah.
is.
Oh
And
yeah.
so, but it just starts one step at a time. And I think I
Mhm.
like really being clear with, again, with boundaries, like what those,
Yeah.
starting to hold um sovereign space for yourself or safe space for yourself that can make a
Mhm.
difference. So, will you go through the boundary, talking about the three different types of boundaries that you gave us in those experience and those examples? It was really powerful.
Yes, thank you. Before I do, I want to just for a moment distinguish between standards and boundaries,
Yes,
just for
thank
a
you.
moment, so they because this was really big for me, and I call it the energetic castle, which is your floors or your standards. walls, windows, doors, everything spatially on the sides of you are your boundaries. And then your ceilings are your desires, your visions, your dreams. And so oftentimes I find standards and boundaries can get kind of talked about in the same way, but if we can really distinguish, standards are the floors. Standards are the lowest that you'll go. They're the line that if it goes under that line, there starts to become an erosion of your sense of self, of what's okay with you. And it's more on the vertical axis, our standards. They're up and down, and they go down. And the point where it goes down and it's like, okay, it's still okay, all right. And then it'll hit a point where it's like, okay, that's not okay. That would be the standard, the lowest point before it starts eroding. And standards are generally between you and you. And they're personal. And they're what, and it's in a feeling body navigation, like you'll just feel it. You'll feel a place where it's like, ooh, okay, that's it. That's low. That's as low as I go. For any situation, any place in your life. And then boundaries are more spatially they can be between you and someone else, or between you and something else. Like we had mentioned about, you and food, or you and alcohol, or you and time, or you and, spatially, it's between you and something else that's out there. And spatially, it's saying, this is my space, and this is how much of that gets to come in, and when and how. And what I've found is it's a lot of it of just registering that we get to have our own space, that's ours. And especially as women, I also find that we can be so responsible for others first and put everything and everyone else first. And so it's a real paradigm shift and reclamation to claim our own space and take up space unapologetically. Mm-hmm. And recognize the power of that to know, okay, the boundaries, and I've named 3 different kinds of boundaries because I've also seen that there's an intensity to it. And some boundaries need to be fierce. And that's where we also hit up against conditioning in women, because we're taught to be so nice and agreeable and, just, pretty everything up, and, don't show any sort of, anger, or don't, just keep everything really, don't make waves. And that will keep us from setting fierce boundaries, because there is a ferocity of energy that's brought to it that says no. And it's no for that I use barbed wire.
Yeah.
Where if you, yeah. And so that
was so powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have women hold the barbed wire, and until you actually embody it and do it, you don't actually know what's there for you. And that's why I love doing it, in person, or just even, saying the statements, and the first one, just grabbing the barbed wire, and the statement would be like, don't fuck with me.
Right.
Like, can you really just say that? And the energy that you're looking for there is honor and respect. And that's what you're commanding in the space. And you're telling something or someone else that that's your line. And sometimes it's just between, you and something. And it's like, I got to hold that fierce boundary. I can't, be soft about this. I need to bring the fire, because this is not lackadaisical. This actually matters and means something. And the higher the cost of crossing that boundary is, the more intense that boundary needs to be. And so the barbed wire is one that for myself too, it was just like, wow, giving myself permission to be that fierce and stand in it, and then not apologize, and asked if it was okay. that was my boundary, and I get to define it, and I use the 3-step process of you define it, and then you communicate it. And then the third part is you hold it,
And hold that boundary, like hold to
hold it.
that boundary. That's a tough piece. That's a tough piece, but like that barbed wire is the non-negotiable. That
Yeah.
is the no. It is the, like you said, don't fuck with me. It is
Yeah.
the, this is like I'm standing up for myself and
Hmm.
and those I care about and
Yeah.
are standing up for these principles and otherwise it's a no.
Yeah.
And that's it. That's it. So I love that visual of the barbed wire. And
Mhm.
and like where there needs to be barbed wire where there hasn't been.
Yeah.
That's been an exercise I've been like working on since the session that you gave. Is like, okay, there's probably more areas there needs to be barbed wire than I have. And I think that's a component of conditioning, being
Yeah.
the good girl, the doer, the healer, the helper, in all these roles. And it's pretty powerful when you see that. That becomes that non-negotiable, the no. And like if there's something you've been doing that hurts yourself, that's harmful to you, that's like
Mhm.
needs to be a barbed wire boundary
Yeah.
versus a soft one. Maybe I'll open the door here and
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
so I think our listeners too can feel those. Okay, what are the barbed wire boundaries in your life, or where do you need to put up some barbed wire boundaries?
Yeah. Yeah. And when the cost is high, it's really feeling into that when it's like the cost is high. And what I recommend for that is you go back to either the standards, like if you don't hold that boundary, then you're going to probably end up dropping a standard lower than you really want it to go. Your health will erode, your relationships will erode, your confidence will erode, like just your integrity starts to erode because you promised yourself something and now you didn't do it, something like that. And so it becomes a practice of realizing like, wow, if I don't hold that, if I don't have that ferocity, it costs me something, and I've seen women where it cost them, they knew they needed to say no and they didn't conjure it up to say it fierce enough. And there's stories of women that have had lots of things happen to them where they knew that they needed to say no. They knew they needed just to hold that with more ferocity. And I find too that it's energizing because it's true,
Mhm.
and that it's really that permission. And once you do it a few times and you get it in your body and you get a sensory motor pattern running in your nervous system that says, oh, this is the pathway, this is how, this is what I say, this is what I do, and you kind of normalize it in your system, it's really healthy, and then you can take care of yourself and you can start to trust yourself that you can take care of yourself. And what I find there is that it's really then a matter of like a self-integrity, where you start to realize that like, oh, okay, I'll show up for myself here, time and time again. And what I see then is women will start going for things that are bigger dreams, bigger things that they want, because they've seen themselves already show up for themselves in a way that they're like, I got this, I can
Yeah.
do this. I now believe in myself, but if they see time and time again that they don't hold that boundary, then when
They
they,
drop their standards and
yeah. And then they'll have the mental game of like, well, why do it? Because I'll just do that again, or, and so it's a strength building, it's an empowerment. But it's also just something that you need to run in your nervous system over and over to be able to have those pathways.
Mhm.
So I love practicing that with me. I love seeing the fire come alive in a woman of just like, oh, I've got this fire, and I don't have to be afraid of it. Like fire isn't there to burn me. It's my chi, it's my energy, it's my truth, it's my vitality,
So
and
good. And then the second boundary.
yeah. So the second one is wood. So wood is the most common. Like we have wood fences in between our homes and neighborhoods, and So would some, oftentimes our boundaries are like agreements that we have with others about where the yeses and the nos live. And so wood is a representation of a boundary where you might have some negotiation. Like if you have a contract, for example, and you go, oh, well, how about, I'm okay with this part, but can we adjust this part and this, and you kind of go back and forth a little bit until you find that sweet spot where it's like, okay, here's the line, but there is some sense of, there's a little bit of negotiation, there's a little bit of back and forth that can happen, and yet it's sturdy, and strong and consciously laid down. You don't see a wood fence where it's like it was consciously put there. It's a demarcation of where one place ends and another begins, and that's a demarcation in our system of where a yes and a no, like it moves from yes to no.
Mhm.
And that's the boundary place. And so wood is strong and sturdy. And I have the statement of a woman says, like, I'm a badass queen.
Mhm.
And she can just hold that frequency of like, I can hold the energy of being a badass for asking what I want, naming my yeses and nos, being open to hear a negotiation and see if that really lands for me or not. And then I can say yes or no, and I can hold it.
And it comes from a place of power.
Yeah.
Comes from a place of power, and I love that. And then the third boundary.
And then the third one is the softest one. And the third one is when is rose petals. So the whole one is the, barbed wire, wood, and then rose petals. And rose petals, they still, when you lay them down, they can draw a line in the sand. They can make a demarcation. But it's much softer. It's the highest frequency, and it's a place where there's already a lot of honor and respect. So oftentimes I use the example of rose petals with loved ones or family or in an intimate relationship where we might think that we don't have any boundaries at all because we're so close, and yet there's a place for them. There's a place for my space and your space, or my time, your time. Yes, I'm available for this now. No, I'm not. Or, those yeses and nos that still get to exist, but they're very soft. And they're soft because they're met with so much honor and respect. And there's so much, it doesn't
Love.
need to be so much love and
Yeah.
care. And that one can be challenging too, because what I'll find there is a woman just doesn't have those boundaries or doesn't feel that she can, or there's sometimes when all that a woman knows is barbed wire. And it's like she won't lay a boundary down until it turns into so intense that she's got to say, don't fuck with me. And,
Right.
bite someone's head off when they're like, whoa, you could have told me that you needed some space. Why didn't you just tell me? Or, hey, why didn't you just ask for what you needed? Like, why'd you let it build up so much? And now I get this barbed wire.
That's a great example. I can definitely pinpoint that in my life too at times.
Yeah.
And so like in looking at, and then that kind of looking at, okay, what is the like the bar, can you give an example? Like the barbed wire, the wood, the rose petals, and that fine line of rose petals. Okay, so I have my daughter Ava at home, and I'm like, I don't know which one I'm going to use to get her to stop using my bathroom. That's the one I want.
Hmm.
So there's going to be rose petals there. But I'm like, I can feel like I want to throw some barbed wire. I don't know. But no, but just
Yeah.
even realizing, you know what, that's a boundary for me. And, we need to
Yeah.
communicate that and not get irritated that she's used my bathroom again. Like it's, to really draw that line of respect.
Yeah.
Um, and I think, is there a question like a sequence, if we lay down those rose petals and they're not honored, then we have to
Mhm.
raise the wood fence and
Yeah.
that's not honored. Then the boundaries, is that
That's usually how it works. Usually how it works. And it'll start, oftentimes, all that's needed for rose petals is just a preference. Just even communicating the verbiage can be, hey, I prefer that, use this bathroom. I prefer, it's a preference.
Mhm.
But in that zone of real true rose petal, of that much honor and respect, a preference is all that's needed. It doesn't have to be anything more, because a preference is heard and responded to. So it could be starting with just a preference. And that's often what I suggest, is start with what you prefer. Hey, listen, I prefer, and starting to get to know your preferences. And it's a whole way of being. It's lightness in your body too. Like, wow, what do I prefer? Let
Right.
me just ask myself that. I get to have preferences, before they get heavy and feel, like violations. Like, I get to just have preferences and exist in that domain and get sensitized to them. Because oftentimes it is that if we're listening to ourselves and really paying attention to our preferences and give ourselves a chance to communicate it early, it doesn't turn in. By the time we get to bobware, it's starting to feel like a violation. It's starting to
Right.
feel like,
Right.
you're not honoring me,
Right. Getting a
you're
little
not
angry
respecting
about it.
me.
It's tough.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. But there probably were whispers of the preferences earlier on, but we just haven't sensitized ourselves or given a permission or had the languaging or just the context for it. So yeah, with the bathroom example, it's often preferences. Hey, I prefer. Hey, I prefer. And that's often with loved ones, or just in a time where that will be heard. And you kind of
Right.
test it out. Test it out. Is it heard? Is it responded to?
I think
Yeah.
testing boundaries is a really good exercise. I mean, just to practice putting them in. And I know women that are very clear with their boundaries, what their non-negotiables are, what they like, what they don't like. And then, I had the single mom experience for so many years, and maternal guilt, and sole provider stuff. And then, it was like my boundaries were like diminished. And so having
Mhm.
the practice of rebuilding, creating my space, my boundaries has really helped me professionally, personally, and in so many ways. And yet it continues to be a practice and a standard. And also the concept of standing up for what you believe in unapologetically. When it's done
Mhm.
from your heart, and you're showing up and not being silenced. We're in a world of especially the feminine voice of love and connection being silenced. And I'm
Yeah.
having a lot of trouble with that, NaniLea.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a boundary place too. The standard of like, what is, okay with me to be silenced or not, and you get to a point where it's an inner agreement with self, that says, in my sovereignty, I will not be silenced,
Yeah.
and so therefore the boundaries, if I hold that standard, what boundaries would I have to hold? And oftentimes we'll drop our standard because holding the boundary is scary. It's the boundary and being able to relate to another human, another being, or being seen in that ferocious no. So rather than be seen in that, we'll drop our own standard. Oh, I'll just be quiet. Oh, I just won't show up. Oh, I just won't. Oh, I'll do something that's a compromise. Oh, whatever it is, I'll drop my standard rather than really get the embodiment of and permission. And a lot of it can just come down to like, what words do I say? How do I, what emotions? And can I be with, I think a lot of it is integrating fire for women too, because there can be, anger that is like, that's wanting to say enough of this. I'm tired of that. I'm tired of this conditioning or this going on. And that's a really sacred energy, that fire of like, oh, enough of this, but then integrating that and having it be used in a healthy way. So it's not a projection and an attack that comes out. And the thing about it, if that energy goes somewhere, and if we're pushing it down or lowering our standards over and over again, eventually it'll come out sideways, or we end up just not taking care of ourselves and being mad at ourselves that we're not giving ourselves, what we really deserve, what we really want to thrive. And that gets old too.
Oh
So,
yeah. Oh yeah. And that, well, before we got started, I was telling you I was leading this group of a few hundred women through my Magic Menopause program. And we're
Yeah.
coming to a close at the time of this recording. And I want them to continue to invest in themselves and do the practices and follow the principles. And I asked for your guidance. Like, what is something I can share with them or tell them, or how can I encourage them to continue in this process, not to give up. Like, when we say, it worked until I stopped doing it. So when what worked stopped working because we weren't doing it, or something like that, or to continue to be curious and investigate and explore. So
Yeah.
it's an amazing group of women. Want to give them every
Oh,
extra support I can.
I love that. I feel your heart in it so much, your heart and your love and care for them. Yeah, I mean, what I can tell you for sure that I've seen over and over again is it's an inside job. Like a woman has to decide. She has to decide that it matters. And what that can come down to is that she decides that she matters and that
Mhm.
her life matters. And it's a self-love, revolution inside that says, you know what? I decide, I choose. I have the mantra of the queen, which is I choose, I decide, I create. Like I choose my life. I decide this. And then defining what are the standards? Like, what will I not drop below anymore? I will not drop below this. I will not. And really defining it. And I think that bringing some definition, writing it down,
Yeah.
because there's a reason that they got in your programs. There was something that was going on. And to remember that original impetus and to remember both ends of it, like there's that saying, like, pain pushes until vision pulls. And it's the pain of like, I'm not going to go down to where I was because there's cost to it.
Mhm.
And getting really honest about the cost and having, a moment of like, I choose here, I decide, like, I will not give up on myself. I will not drop the standard. I'm going to show up, and standard has the word stand in it. Like you take a stand for yourself, you take a stand for your life. Um, and then from there, it's the boundaries of just knowing that there's going to be moments, like not pretending that there's going to be moments, probably many of them. And, I call them initiations. Like you get initiated into a new embodiment of what you really desire, what you really want, and how you get initiated into that, how you own it, like how you really own it, where you just don't even have to think about it anymore because it's so a part of you, is that you get initiated into it by your choices, by these moments where you are at that crossroads that asks you, am I going to go this other way that takes me back that other route? Or am I going to really stand for myself, use my voice, love myself enough to bet on me, to choose me, to show up for me, and to do the thing, and staying really honest, really, really honest. And I think it's
That feels
always,
good. And it just
yeah,
feels good, right? It
yeah,
just feels good.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you, NaniLea. I know we could talk for hours, and I know you give retreats, and those starting back up
Mhm.
in 2025.
Yeah,
So you'll be doing some
yeah,
retreats, and tell our audience how they can connect with you.
yeah. I can find
Although I
me.
do hate to end this conversation, by the
I
way.
know, it's so good. Well, I have an online community where I gather women and we meet a couple times a month. It's called wildrosemembership.com. I have that. And finding me, on social media, on either Instagram, dr.nanilea, that's my handle on Instagram, or on Facebook. And just come be a part of the community, come be a part of the journey. I also am getting ready to do my first online cohort of this teaching of the energetic castle, of standards, boundaries, and upper limits and ceilings, and really going through each step by step of how to wire that into your system. So I'll be announcing that soon too. And it's a journey, for every woman out there, just really just know that like we're all in the journey. We all have our edges, and you just meet yourself at that edge, and just, every day, just one step further, and paying attention to that mantra inside. What do you tell yourself? And the mantra I give you is, I create, I choose, I decide.
I love it. Hmm. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, NaniLea, for being on the Girlfriend Doctor show today and sharing your wisdom and
Mhm.
these practices, because we have to put them into practice. So everyone who's listening,
Yeah.
write down, what you're going to bring to your practice. That what are your soft petal boundaries? What are your wood boundaries? What is your barbed wire?
Mm.
Where do you hold the barbed wire boundaries? And do this exercise because it does make a difference. And then looking at communicating, right? Decide and then communicate your boundaries will make a difference in your life. So, my dog
Mhm.
Sandy is telling me something here. If you hear my dog in the background, but
Yeah.
I want
Yeah,
to
and it's
thank you all for
amazing
being.
you get your energy back.
Yeah,
It's
get
an
your
almost
energy back.
instant, whoo, you get your energy back once you live in that truth and set that in, because there's literal energy leaks coming out of your system. So it's, yeah, just encourage you.
Well, that is
Thank
our
you.
next right step to do today. And I thank you all for being here with the Girlfriend Doctor Show. Please comment below this video wherever you're listening to this podcast. On YouTube, it's easy to use comments, and I read every one of them. So I thank you for following and sharing this episode. All right. Till next time, everyone. God bless you. Thank you.